listener production.
Hey, it's Helen Smith here with The Briefing. The Victoria's Secret show is officially back after a nearly 6-year hiatus. It featured a performance from Cher alongside Kate Moss, Tyra Banks and Adriana Lima all hitting the runway. It was announced earlier this year that the controversial and somewhat iconic runway show was returning with the aim to, quote, reflect who we are today. The last Victoria's Secret show was in 2018, and it was surrounded by controversy after an interview in Vogue with Razek, the company's former chief marketing officer, dismissed the ideas of integrating inclusivity, explaining why the runway didn't include transgender or plus-size models, saying, quote, because the show is a fantasy. And he used the word transsexual, which is an outdated and offensive term to describe transgender models. Then, in 2019, the show was cancelled following the comments slowing sales and declining ratings. A massive competitor also entered the space in 2018, with Rihanna's Savage Fenty show taking the stage, showcasting models of all abilities, races and genders. And in that same year, CNN reported that Victoria's Secret's market share dropped to 24%, down from 31.7% in 2013. And the issues for the brand and its reputation didn't stop there. In 2020, the New York Times published an investigation that reported an alleged culture of misogyny, bullying and harassment at the company, which included interviews from more than 30 current and former executives, employees, contractors and models. But with so much brand damage over the years, is there space for the show anymore? Milo Hartill is a model, actor and singer. Milo, thanks for joining us on The Briefing. Why is the Victoria Fashion Show back?
Well, I guess they're trying to reverse all of the crazy, crazy stuff that they said in 2018 and trying to, be a part of the current conversation. But I don't know. I feel like this year's show kind of was hit and miss.
Do you think that they achieved what they were wanting to achieve with this year's show?
I think it was kind of like when your granddad's like, don't worry, I get all the lefty stuff. I get it. I get all your woke stuff. And then you're like, okay, granddad, slay. And then you see what his definition of that is and you're like, well, I guess it was better than last time, but it's, I maybe wouldn't say it was like at the standard that we would want.
Yeah. So do you think that there's inherently something wrong with a show like Victoria's Secret?
I don't think in the right hands, no. I think celebrating femininity and power and taking charge of your body, especially in the connotations that there is with lingerie of being sexy and being a part of people who enjoy wearing lingerie's journey to feeling empowered and embodied in their sexuality and feeling like their body in itself is a piece of art. But I feel like in the wrong hands that can be taken, it can feel objectifying and very old-timey. And I think as well by nature of when Victoria's Secret came up, there's so many old thoughts about women, I'm going to say in quotation marks, because obviously not just women enjoy wearing lingerie. But yeah, it feels very much like this is a woman's thing for women to look sexy for men. This is for the male gaze. We want men to think we're sexy. And I don't think that speaks to the current cultural conscience that most young people and people, maybe not even young people, but most people that are a part of the fashion space and are wanting to look forward and see how we can make fashion and lingerie and the embodiment of sex and sexiness something that everyone has available to them, not just what is deemed as the elite, which is thin and white and a certain height and blue eyes and gorgeous flowing blonde hair that's been done in a blow wave to the gods for 19 hours, but they're supposed to make us think that they did that in 1 minute and she just woke up out of bed and got out and looked like that. And that's not the reality, and I don't think that represents the full scope of what is beautiful and what is embodied and what is sexy and what looks good in lingerie.
Do you think that this attempt to save its public image could make people forget about its controversial past?
I'm of the mindset that I'm like, this was a good step And I'd love to see what's next. I think it was really cool to see that there were trans models in the show. The age diversity was really cool. I feel like being a young person and being a part of a lot of intersections of groups that are oppressed and marginalised, I forget that ageism is a huge thing, and I think as well something, because it's not my lived experience yet, and I think as well disability representation is something that I don't think of as much because it's not something that affects me yet. But it was very cool to see the age diversity. I think it was really, truly a breath of fresh air and something I wasn't expecting from them. I think in my mind, I was like, right, these were the specific comments that were made, that they don't want trans bodies and they don't want plus size bodies, was the comments in 2018. So I was like, okay, if they're going to come back, they're going to want to prove that point, drill that point home. But yeah, I think it would have been nice to see more trans models in there. I think it would have been nice to see like different kinds of fat bodies in there. I was like, okay, who are the Avengers of plus size models in the US? They're all going to be in there. Paloma being in there, not a surprise. Ashley Graham being in there, not a surprise. And I think that there's such a huge scope of gorgeous plus size talent. It could change their footprint and what people think about them. But I think we're a little bit of a way off there yet.
Yeah, listening to some of the things you just mentioned there, the bar was pretty low for what they needed to improve on. And we mentioned before the Savage Fenty shows, which started in 2018, which from the start have included all genders, abilities and races. Like they've showcased that from the start. Do you think that we might be like, wow, a bit impressed with Victoria's Secret because the bar was so low?
Absolutely. I feel like that's kind of like across all forms of media, fashion, entertainment, advertising. The bar for everything is so low that sometimes I'll walk past a store in the CBD and go, oh my God, there's a brown person in that. That's so awesome. Gold star. You just won diversity. But then I think about how many people of colour, plus size people, disabled people, older people, people that look different to me, that are different to me, that are from different walks of life from me, make up just my bubble. It's like, oh, I don't know if that represents who everyone is. That doesn't represent the world that I know to be true.
We've seen in the past year or so a little bit of a backstep in some media and fashion shows with chic skinny being back in. Do you think that runway shows have stopped being so inclusive? I feel like a few years before there was this massive push. Has this push stopped?
In the last 6 years, since I started modelling and being in the entertainment industry and blah, 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 it was like 2020 to mid-2022, the phone didn't stop ringing. It was just like, we need a fat girl who is black and cool who can come and do this now. And then just slowly it all petered out. And I was kind of like, is it just me? And then I kind of looked around to a lot of my friends who are, you know, in similar spheres to me, do similar jobs to me. And it was like, oh, like none of us are getting cast in these fashion shows anymore. And people who are getting cast, it's like, you know, I have friends who are models who are size 14 to 16 and they're on a runway and they are markedly the biggest person there. And it's like, oh, that's like a hard pill to swallow, which I am already anticipating some fatphobic comments coming from that, which I can't wait to put into my next One Woman show. But I feel like it's the pendulum swing. It felt like post-Trump, post-ScoMo, post like everything went so far to the right for like 2015 to 2020-ish. And then I think it got so bad that then there was like a really harsh pendulum swing to the left with Black Lives Matter happening. And I feel like, yeah, there was a huge public consciousness being like, oh my God, we need to look after minorities and people that are being ostracized and marginalized. And then it just feels like now we're really in the pits of that. It just feels like we're going back the other way. And I think that all of that kind of public stress, and as well, obviously, like things that are happening with transgender bodies, the viewpoints people have about fat people, Ozempic being very on the rise. It just feels like that the trickle down of the big picture things that are happening is kind of coming down into our fashion, into our media, into our entertainment. You know, TV stations don't want to take risks anymore. And so many things that were happening that were interesting, and seeing such a wider scope of representation, whether that be on TV, whether that be on radio, in podcasting, in advertising, we're just not seeing it anymore because it feels too scary to people to back up all of the things that we said we wanted in 2020 and 2021. But I think those risks have to be taken, or you're signing people's death sentences. Like, you're making people feel unworthy and disgusting and gross. And it's like, is it really that important to be championing the voices that want to shut down those that aren't like them or aren't something they aspire to be?
Yeah, and I think a lot of the issue people had was a lot of these decisions were being made by men and being made about women and how women should look and how they should be presented. And this was actually reflected in their market value. It went down because people didn't align with the brand anymore. They didn't align with this angel figure that they've created, and other brands stepped up. Do you think if their sales weren't going down, if their viewership wasn't declining, that they would have made any changes?
No, absolutely not. Why would you? Like, I know why I would, but why would you if you were the old CEO of VS? Like why would you? I feel like people have that view of go woke, go broke, but also don't fix it if it ain't broke as well. Like, it's just like, it's very funny to me that people are like, I don't want to change the business. I don't want to change how we represent people because we're making money. It's like, you're missing out on such a huge market. Like, I feel like people don't realize people that aren't young, thin and pretty also want to wear nice clothes. It's like, and as well, I do think that part of that is people are like, well, you deserve to be punished for being fat. That's what you get. If you don't want to lose the weight, then you can wear that muumuu with a floral print that's black with a peplum skirt. It's like, okay, ew. I'm not doing that. It's funny to me, like, I know I'm very beautiful, but I also have so many fat friends that are just stunning, gorgeous, like, some of the most beautiful people I know are fat people. And it's just funny to me that there's just this like tunnel vision of like, I refuse to see it. It's like, it's undeniable.
I want to talk now also about male models for a second, because Vogue reported last year that out of the 97 runway shows that they reviewed during this 2023 spring season, only 12 of those shows featured models outside of the set standard. And that set standard, it wasn't larger people. Like, the set standard's quite small and limited. Do you think that male models are often left out of these conversations?
I feel like men have kind of been left out of the modelling and fashion conversation for a long time. Queer culture influences fashion a lot. And so I think that lots of queer/gay men have had a huge influence on fashion, but do you see those voices being like focused on? I don't know. I don't think so. I think unfortunately fat bias does surpass gender and those kind of identifying markers. In the Australian scene, we're seeing a lot more plus size male models being uplifted and featured a lot, which is incredible. But there's so much work that needs to be done. But I also think that there's something in that fatness is kind of associated with femininity, and femininity is kind of bastardized and picked apart. And I also think that fatness has a huge association with brown bodies, which again is something that people don't have interest in dissecting what that intersection and how that plays into the biases we have kind of is all a part of one big family.
Do you think the Victoria's Secret show should come back next year?
Yeah, why not? Why not? Love to talk about it. I do love to talk about it, and I love fashion, and I love, the art of runway and putting together a show like that and being on the other side. Like, I love the rush of a quick change and capturing an audience and showing off a garment. But I just hope next year maybe they take some bigger risks. I want to see some cool underground New York plus-size model that I've never heard of before on that runway. I want to see someone in new wings that I'm like, oh my God, who is that? That person is a star. The end.
Milo, thanks so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Thank you so much for having me. Can't wait to be back.
That was Milo Hartil, model, actor, unpacking this year's Victoria's Secret fashion show. And Milo is currently in Flat Earthers the Musical at the Hayes Theatre in Sydney until the 9th of November. If you want a little bit more of Milo, definitely go check her out there. And that's it for this episode of The Briefing. We'd love it if you could share this ep with someone else you think might enjoy it as well. And if you want to keep up with our other content, you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast and on TikTok and YouTube. Just search for Listener Newsroom. And we'll be back in your feed at 6 a.m. tomorrow. I'm Helen Smith. See you next time.
Listener.